What's up, everybody? We're going to go ahead and add in some of our friends over there on Facebook and on Twitter. So give me just a second here. Got folks already starting to jump in here. All right. And we are live. We are underway. What's up, everybody? My name is Garrett Chapman. Welcome into the Falcons Podcast with me, your host, Garrett Chapman. And I'm really excited to jump in with you all today because it's a big day across the NFL, but especially here with our Atlanta Falcons, because it's cut day. We finally get our 53-man roster, or, well, in our case, a 52-man roster. And we've been bringing content to you all day, just as leaks started coming out, but we finally have an official list. If you want to go check that full list out, plus my instant reactions that we're going to be getting into here on the pod today, go head on over to si.com/NFL/Falcons. And you can find all of that, plus the actual physical roster that you can follow along with. But give me a follow at GChapATL on Twitter. Stay fully up to date on everything that we have coming out on Falcons on SI. But like I said, we have a big show set up for you today. I will be taking your questions, so make sure to drop those down in the comments. Make sure to like the video and subscribe as you're going along. But I'll get to as many of those as I can because I know it's a huge day. We have our initial gut reactions to everything that we see today. And like I said, while you're at it, like the video, share the video with all your friends so they can get in on some of this Falcons discussion. But as of tonight, we'll dig into the Kaleb McGary news injury update, what it means for the Falcons. I know we talked a little bit about it, just kind of speculatively. But now we finally have a definitive answer of how long he's going to be on the shelf, and it's not good. We'll also talk about this 52-man roster, 53-man roster, technically Falcons at 52. That we have here, and then we'll get to your questions after that. But let's start here with the biggest news of the day. It's the fact that Kaleb McGary will be out for the season. He was put on IR without a designation, which means, like I said, he's going to miss the season. Storm Norton, I know there was a little bit of speculation that he might miss, or he might be waived and then brought back on like a practice squad type of situation. I don't know what people were saying with it necessarily. All we know is that he is on the IR with a designation to return. Now, you were able to get two of those types of players. One of those was used on Norton. The other one was used on Daquan Graham. As a result, I mean, they're going to be allowed to return at some point throughout the regular season. We think it's going to be sometime around the bye week, just based off of some of the reports that we've seen. But in the meantime, the Falcons are going to have 4 games that they're going to have to play, at least 4 games that they're going to have to play. And Elijah Wilkinson is currently the starter. Brandon Parker, Jack Nelson, neither of those guys really gave you a lot of confidence. Me specifically, I can speak for myself there. Neither Parker nor Jack Nelson really gave me a lot of confidence in that backup role. So you see the Falcons go out and make a move. Michael Jarrell comes in from Seattle, traded 2027 7th-round pick. Earlier today. He may contend for the starting spot. It may be Elijah Wilkinson's. I just know that this team didn't have a swing tackle. So you needed to have somebody who can come in and at least fill that role for the time being. When it's all said and done, these guys are going to be competing for that swing tackle role. Jarrell and Wilkinson are just in the time that it takes for Norton to get back. So I don't know what's going to happen at that position. I know that we're going to talk to Terry Fontenot here in a little bit. And I know that Raheem Morris is going to address the media later on this week, and I'm sure we'll ask him about that. But as far as the guy that Jarrell is, former 6th-round pick. I mean, he started a couple of games last year, 4 games. Ironically, his first start came in Atlanta against the Falcons. But when it was all told, he plays just 245 snaps at right tackle throughout his rookie season. He was credited with giving up, 15 total pressures, 3 sacks, and 2 quarterback hits last year. PFF gave him a pass blocking grade of 54.8%, or 54.8, and then a run blocking grade of 49.5. And those are on a scale of 0 to 100. So it's not exactly the most solid numbers. I mean, he's ranked 95th in pass blocking grades, and that's not necessarily, 95th and then 123rd. That's what it is, respectively, out of the 140 total tackles. So it's very clear that this is a stopgap type of player. He's not somebody who's going to come in and be an immediate type of elevation over Elijah Wilkinson necessarily. And I still believe that Elijah Wilkinson's considered the starter, but ultimately, I do consider this team to be far from finished. I know that there are going to be a lot of teams who are going to go and try to poach other players. I know that's one of the big topics for folks is which guys they think that they can get through waivers to get them back onto their practice squad. They're going to start signing practice squad players at noon tomorrow. So that's when we're really going to start getting an idea of who the Falcons are going to be targeting. They have 16 total spots for that. With the 17th, I'm assuming is going to go out to Lenny Krieg, the kicker, just due to the International Pathways program that he is a part of. But I mean, I think that they're going to be active here. I think that this is a position. This one in particular is one that is far from done. I know Dan Skipper, that's a name that was floated around. He was a surprise cut by the Lions yesterday. He could be an option for this team. But there are several players in that mix. La'el Collins, I think somebody threw that name out there. I don't think he's necessarily going to be the best option here for the team, just based off of where he is in his career. But, trading a conditional 2027 seventh round pick, it doesn't mean a whole bunch. Speaking of what was given up for Jarrell, just in the grand scheme of things, it's not a whole lot. So that's something that they can quickly move off of and not really feel too much from that. I do think that they are going to bring somebody in. I don't know who that person's going to be yet, but all the more reason to give me a follow at GChatPTL while we follow it all along with you. But ultimately, Kaleb McGary is going to be a tough loss. This is going to be felt for a few weeks. And it's not great that you have the opening games of the Falcons season are likely the most difficult. I mean, I just pulled these up here. You start the season, of course, with Tampa Bay. Then it's a road game against the Minnesota Vikings, who have one of the best defenses in the NFL, or at least they did last season. It's a road game against the Carolina Panthers team that, look, they gave you all that you could handle last year, and they dropped 40-plus points on you in Week 18 last season. It's the Washington Commanders, then it's the Buffalo Bills and the San Francisco 49ers. That's your first 7 weeks of the season. So this Falcons team is going to have to figure this out. They're going to have to figure it out in a hurry because these teams of this bunch, there are a whole lot who like to rush the passer and get in the backfield and cause a lot of problems. So it's going to be by committee. I believe it's going to be just in the early goings here between Wilkinson and Jarrell, but we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening with that. But reminder, I will be taking your questions. I see we've got well over 100 folks who are in the chat. Welcome. Thank you so much for jumping in here. My name is Garrett Chapman, for anybody who is not familiar with me, just because this is a big day. So I know we have potentially a lot of new faces. So while you're here, make sure to like the podcast. Make sure to subscribe just so you can get all kinds of content here just like this. If you're a Falcons fan, this is the place you should be. But also share it with your friends. We'd really appreciate bringing in and getting a big old Falcons community here just so we can all chat and, just talk about Falcon things, man. It's one of my favorite things to do. So I appreciate everybody who jumped in and joining me in here. But again, I'll be taking your questions. So make sure to drop those in the chat and I'll get to as many of those as I can throughout the course of the show. But I do want to jump into our 53-man roster reactions. So the first thing that I'm going to do here, just kind of roll through some of my just initial surprises. And this will go back even to what we saw on Saturday, like when Lamar Jackson and Morgan Fox were cut. And that's pretty much where I'll start is the fact that Morgan Fox was cut. It was he's a veteran guy on this roster. He's somebody who I thought was going to come in and be a solid roster addition who's going to be a part of that rotation. And you see the Falcons opt to keep 5 different defensive linemen. So it's David Onyemata, Ruka Roro, Zach Harrison, Brandon Dorless, and Laquale London, Simeon Barrow, Kentavious Street, Morgan Fox. They're the ones who are the notable cuts. And Nate Ollie talked a lot about how much this unit's going to turn over. So you talk about the surprises. I thought that they were going to carry 6 or even maybe 7 guys on this unit. He talked about having 3, maybe 4 plays per player. And it's very important that you're going to turn over a lot of these guys. So you have to have a lot of guys who were able to come in and stay fresh. So that was my inclination. I thought they were going to carry 6. They ended up carrying 5, and they put the roster in. They put more value into other positions. But no, Morgan Fox was owed a little bit of money there. He's 30 years old. He's played 120 games, 34 starts over the last couple of seasons, and 5.5, like almost $6 million. That's not nothing. And then the fact that he was signed as a free agent is just this past offseason. It was a little surprising that he ended up being cut. But I also think that it's not a negative thing either, because you were really expecting guys like Rucororo and Zach Harrison and Brandon Dorless, guys like that, to take a big step forward. You're really banking on them to do that. You still are banking on them to do that. And what this also tells me is that those guys did enough in camp to make you feel comfortable enough with cutting a guy like that, and cut an extra guy on top of that. I thought they were going to carry 6. They're only carrying 5, and they cut one of the veterans. That tells me that those guys are everything advertised. And I know that I just, based off of conversations that I've had with this coaching staff and some of these other players, they have plenty of reason to be very excited about where this roster stands. And I'm very excited about that defensive line and that edge rush too. So I think that's going to be one of the places where this team improves more than anything. The next big instant reaction that I got was the fact that Jordan Fuller was cut. I, like many of you, expected him to potentially be starting, not to be the guy who's on the outside looking in. I said in my reactions piece that it felt like the safety spot in particular was one of the only preordained positions on the roster. But Jordan Fuller is on the way out. And, I'll say this too, like with the defensive line, you drafted a guy in Xavier Watts who you're expecting to jump in and be a strong player for you. The fact that you feel this comfortable that you can move on from Jordan Fuller, and now he wasn't guaranteed as much money as Morgan Fox was, but still, that's a lot of veteran savvy that you just shipped out, and that tells me that Xavier Watts is ready to go. It tells me that DeMarco Hellams is healthy and he's ready to go. And it tells me that you wanted to watch these guys develop on the football field on Sundays, not on the practice field, not on the practice squad, not taking reps with the younger guys, as a starting player on the Atlanta Falcons. And Jordan Fuller was just going to get in the way of that. So that's ultimately what the coaching staff sees. So they're going to carry 3 safeties on the roster. I expected them to carry 4. But now the biggest question is who starts opposite of Jesse Bates. Xavier Watts feels like an obvious choice at this point. DeMarco Hellams, he's going to give you a whole lot just in terms of special teams work and the way that he's able to be a thumper there at that next level. I think it's going to be very valuable. So very excited to see just the potential with Xavier Watts and DeMarco Hellams. I'm still very surprised that they ended up cutting Jordan Fuller. The other spot that I'm really surprised, I guess you could say, maybe not the perfect word for it. I tweeted that I was surprised and some people pushed back on me, but it's the fact that Easton Stick is not going to be on the 53-man roster. And I said, excuse me, I have a golden retriever and his hair gets in my mouth sometimes. Excuse me. But I said at the beginning that of the preordained positions, safety was one. Well, quarterback I felt like was the other. Michael Penix, he's going to be your starter, obviously. Kirk Cousins, I thought, was going to be your backup quarterback here. I think that the potentials for trades have effectively all but shipped out. I don't think that's even in the cards anymore. But Easton Stick, I thought, was going to be that third quarterback, that smash the glass in case of emergency quarterback for this team. And I guess not. He led all of preseason football in passing, 520 yards. He had a bad interception, but he recovered well from it. But he projects as a steady backup. He's somebody who I think could be an eventual practice squad guy for this Falcons team. But, I'm still a little surprised, because he'd been a good practicer. It seemed like the squad had liked him enough to potentially get in and add him to this role and hold on to him. But I also think, like I said earlier with some of these other guys, it's as much about who you want to keep as much as it is who you think you can get through waivers. So this just tells me that they are confident enough that there are some other guys on other teams who were cut that they think are going to be taken over Easton Stick. So don't hit a panic button necessarily if you're Easton Stick or you're somebody who wanted Easton Stick to stick around. No pun intended. I don't necessarily think there are a lot of people like that, but he's still somebody who adds some value to this team. And I was a little surprised, but ultimately I think that's what it comes down to, is the fact that you have more guys over there who are going to take precedence over Easton Stick. The other big surprise is coming in here in the secondary. I mentioned the safety position with Jordan Fuller, but you go to the other defensive back spots, and I was a little surprised. And it's more about the presence of Clark Phillips on here than it is anything else. We haven't seen him. He's been dealing with a rib injury for some time, at least the last couple of weeks or so. And I mean, he's been dealing with it for some time. Excuse me, my phone just went off. But look, I thought that was going to be enough to keep him off of the roster, because the best ability is availability. And he hasn't been playing, but I mean, he's a former Lombardi winner. I mean, he was a solid player at the college level, but maybe it's the fact that they see him as somebody who can kind of cross train and kind of go on the inside, also go on the outside. I was a little surprised that Clark Phillips ended up making this team. AJ Terrell, Mike Hughes, Billy Bowman, Natrone Brooks, those are guys who I expected to make the roster. Dee Alford, I know he's very popular with a lot of people in the comments. I'm sure I'm going to read through these comments here in just a moment. And I know for a fact that someone's going to have mentioned Dee Alford. Look, he's somebody who's gotten a lot of run with the ones, and he's somebody who this team sees as a guy who can play on the inside or on the outside, and that kind of versatility is important. But he's also going to contribute to this team in special teams, so that is an important position. For that versatility is very important. Mike Ford is the other guy who's going to hold that role. Now, I'm not really surprised that those two guys make the roster just based off of the way that they've been rotating at camp. But Clark Phillips, I thought, was pretty surprising. And for everybody who's going to say Kobe Bryant was that next guy, Kobe Bryant, just like Clark Phillips, hasn't practiced a whole lot. He's missed a lot of time with soft tissue injuries. And then it was on the NFI list to start camp. So he started out on the back end, and he really needed to fight his way up. And it looks like he was at times, but I don't think he ever did enough to pass a guy like Lamar Jackson or a guy like, and then they go and add CJ Henderson. I had a hard time believing that he were going to pass him as well. But Dante Manning also got a lot of run. Keith Taylor. I don't think that those guys necessarily had a great shot to make the roster, but Kobe was someone who's a fan favorite. And I know that a lot of fans are really disappointed that he got cut. It's just, he's a UDFA who didn't get a lot of playing time because he was hurt. And that's really all it comes down to. But I do think of the positions, this is one of those positions where they're going to want to keep a lot of bodies around, because you have Clark Phillips, who we don't know what his injury designation is. And then look, it's very thin. I share a lot of the opinions of folks about Dee Alford and just the overall coverage ability of some of these guys. Just consistency more than anything else. We'll see what it all ends up happening, but Natrone Brooks, I do want to shout him out just as a great story, as somebody who came into this process pretty far off the bubble and on the outside looking in, but he fought his way up, and he had a fantastic camp. Had the interception against the Titans, and then he had another one on this time a week ago, and he's had a great camp. So really excited about him. And then the last big surprise, and then we'll kind of dig through the rest of this roster here. We've reacted to the offensive line. I've given you some stuff on the secondary, the defensive line, the quarterback position, things like that. But then as far as your pass catchers are concerned, I'm more surprised that they're keeping 4 tight ends. Kyle Pitts, Charlie Warner, fine. Like I get those two. Kyle Pitts is kind of trends towards being more of an X type of receiver or something, a big bodied wide receiver. But Charlie Warner was going to come in and be your blocking tight end. But Tegan Quintarano and Felipe Franks, and Tegan, I'm so sorry. I keep mispronouncing your name. I cannot say it. I don't know what's wrong with me. Even Felipe Franks, I thought it was going to be one or the other. And it turns out the staff is going to opt to keep both. And Tegan was, and Felipe, I mean, they both offered you something on special teams. And I think that ultimately is the biggest thing here, because this coaching staff sees the value in special teams. And you see that based off of the guys they keep at the wide receiver position, the guys they keep at the cornerback position, D'Angelo Malone coming back, and he's still going to stay on this team as an outside linebacker, even though he's been cross-training and kind of going both ways with inside linebacker. But this staff values special teams in a big way. And Tegan goes on and he recovers a punt. Felipe, he's a very active practice guy. And if you watch this guy practice, you can see why the coaching staff loves him. and he's physical. He wants to get after it, and he adds sort of that intensity that you really want to have when it comes to special teams. And I'm excited about what those guys can do, but I'm still surprised that you chose to keep both of them. I don't think that anybody was going to go poach Teagan or Felipe off of the waivers. I thought that you could have used that position maybe in the cornerback room, specifically somewhere along the defense, maybe even on the defensive line. But clearly this team sees value in that special teams unit. I don't think that they're going to even get all that much run just in terms of playing at the tight end position. Kyle Pitts is going to spend a lot of time on the field. Charlie Warner is your primary blocker. So both of these guys are going to come in here and be depth guys on offense and then just primary special teams guys. So we'll see what ends up going on with that. But the other big thing is David Sills makes the roster. We talked about Casey Washington a lot. I'm pretty sure that he was going to make the roster, but then David Sills just starts playing his way in there. Darnell Mooney and Ray McLeod, they've both been dealing with some injuries. Darnell, of course, he's been dealing with the upper body injury. And Ray's just been kind of in and out of practice. No clear designation from the team that I can remember off the top of my head, but he's somebody who's going to be very important to keep an eye on, especially in this early parts of the season. But with Drake London and Darnell Mooney and Ray McLeod, that's 1, 2, 3. That's a very strong trio. But with those two guys on the back of those three injured, Casey Washington pushes his way up, and then it's Kadero Hodge and Jamal Agnew. But those two guys are primarily special teams players. Who is going to be that extra wide receiver just in case? David Sills is somebody who had a fantastic camp, and he's rewarded with the final roster spot. Jesse Matthews, Quincy Skinner, Chris Blair, Nick Nash, Dylan Drummond. Those are other guys who are on the outside. And Nick Nash, another popular UDFA. Some of those guys, I think maybe two of them, maybe three might jump onto the practice squad here. But ultimately, David Sills has had the best camp. He's been a favorite target for Kirk Cousins in practice with the twos. And he's had some pretty good plays in preseason games in front of everybody else too. So whenever somebody gets pulled and kind of shifted into special teams and after one drive, that kind of screams roster spot. And that's why he was in my most recent 53-man roster projection, which ironically, I would actually say did decently well. I'm pretty proud of myself. I'll pat myself on the back for that. But ultimately, I mean, if there's another position that you guys want me to go through the roster on, feel free to drop that into the comments. If you have thoughts about what you think about this Atlanta Falcons team, now that this roster is officially official, quasi-officially official, I guess you could say. Nothing's going to be written in stone until we get to the practice squad, or really till we get to week 1, because a lot of moves are still could be made. All right. I'm going to start digging through some of these comments. I'm sure we've got a whole bunch of them. Let's start here. We're going to go to Ed Burris. Oh, Bud, my man. He's going to come in here. He's really excited about Younghoe Koo. He's a Georgia Southern grad. He's just like me. I went to Georgia Southern. He's excited that Younghoe Koo is going to be on this roster. And I mean, look, he's been one of the best players, at least most consistent players on this roster for the last couple of years since he joined in 2019. He's up to 3rd on the list in total scoring, just in team history, which is very impressive. But he's somebody who's been playing at a high level, and he's somebody who, I mean, yes, he had injuries last year, and yes, that was it derailed his season. But he also hit a 58-yard game winner against the New Orleans Saints. And the guy, if he's healthy, is as good as any kicker in the NFL. And I would say he might actually be one of the most consistent in the NFL. So a lot of people were very eager to push him out the door for some reason. Sometimes it's just about what's shiny and new, but Younghoe Koo is here to stay. And I'm excited for Younghoe just in general. He's had a fantastic camp. He's just been, he hasn't really missed anything. I know he had the 51-yard miss last Friday in Dallas, but I'm glad that this team didn't overreact to that. Let's see. Bucks raise bolts. Falcons place starting right tackle Kaleb McGary on injured reserve. Yes. And you say it's sad news. Yes, it is sad news. It's not good. I know we started the podcast off with it. It was the most important news of the day. It's just tough. It's really tough that it actually ends up that way. But they're going to have a couple of options potentially. Elijah Wilkinson is the guy right now who's on the roster. Michael Jarrell. They go and trade off for him. He's out from Seattle. We'll see. I mentioned earlier that I do think that the Falcons go to the waivers and potentially pull in another guy. Dan Skipper was a name. Leo Collins is another name. Both of those are veterans. I don't know if either of those make the cut as far as being the future Falcons, that is. But ultimately, this is a spot that the Falcons are in, and it's just not a good one, especially right here at the very end. Dantes Jackson, what's up, man? Very excited for you, man. Welcome in. Welcome in. Rusty Moore, you ask why. I don't know what you're asking why about. But yes. And one thing that's mentioned, Falcons on SI, our Facebook. I think this is Scott, if he's jumping in. He says, remember, stars are the #1 way to support all Falcons and help us bring you more and more Atlanta Falcons content. Anything and everything is appreciated. So again, thank you all for jumping in here. I see we've got well over 250 almost total people watching across all of our platforms. Thank you very much for jumping in here. I know this is it's a lot of news that we're going to be getting into, Falcons news. It is cut day. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have things that you think the Falcons did right, you think the Falcons did wrong, make sure to drop it into the comments, and I'm going to roll through here and take some of your comments. But we're up to almost 250 people. I see 5 likes. Thank you so much for all the folks who dropped those likes in. Make sure to share, make sure to like and make sure to subscribe, man, because this is the #1 way that we can kind of keep the lights on and kind of keep bringing this great content to you. So appreciate everybody and all the good folks who've jumped in here with us. Derek says, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening indeed. Jason Greenway says, no way does this roster stay the same. No, I don't think that this roster is anywhere close to being done. I think that this roster still has a good ways to go. Ultimately, the offensive line is the position that I really highlight. But that doesn't mean that they might go out and bring in another cornerback. You know, Clark Phillips was somebody who I was a little surprised made the final cut, but you never know. You never know. Maybe they go out and find another corner who was cut. I'm not privy to all the other comings and goings of the rest of the league. I obviously focus on the Falcons, and I know that there are some positions of weakness on this team, and I know that there are veterans cut every single cut year or every single cut day this time before the season. So there are going to be talented players who are still out there on the market. So it depends on what they do. Offensive line is really the position that I think that they're going to target. Derek Hughes says, very surprised that D. Alford made the team. I'm not surprised. I know he left a lot to be desired at times in coverage last year. I think that Billy Bowman's presence is really the most important thing. You know, I mean, D. Alford is a valuable depth player, and he's going to provide you something at the very least on special teams. So that's not something that you really want to move off of. And Billy Bowman, I expect to be the starter. You know, Billy Bowman was the guy who I think a couple of weeks ago, one of the first podcasts that we did here, I kind of did our rookie projections, and I said, Billy Bowman is the guy who's going to start first for the Atlanta Falcons of the rookies. You know, James Pierce is going to get a lot of run. Jalen Walker's going to get run. Xavier Watts, guys like that. But Billy Bowman was drafted to come in here and do this specific role, and I think that he has the perfect body for it. And he's physical. He's not necessarily very tall, but he's small enough, and he's explosive enough. They talk about being Cobra-like. And I think Billy is going to be the guy who's going to come in here and be very effective in that role. So I don't think I think D. Alford is just going to be a depth player for the most part, and depth players are important, especially when they can play special teams. Michael Ronquillo on YouTube, just send some hearts, man. A little black and red heart. I appreciate you. Alberto Molina on YouTube says, hey, Scott, did you go back in time and get younger? Just kidding. What's good, Garrett? Let the games begin. Rise up. Very excited. Yeah, maybe. I hear Scott had a I don't know, long hair, I guess, when he was younger. I didn't know Scott when he was younger. I've only known Scott for a short period of time, but maybe I'll take that as a compliment. I know Scott's a good dude, so I'll take that as a compliment. But yeah, no, let the games begin. We're just very, very close to getting to actual real football. And I know that that's really exciting. I'm thrilled about it. The preseason, all these people talking about whether or not starters play in the preseason. Yeah, that's all I see about it. I know that real starters are going to play real football games in under 2 weeks. So very excited about that. Derek Hughes mentions sad news about Kaleb being out for the season. Yes, very sad news indeed. I am not super thrilled about that. And I know that the Falcons are not either. Let's keep on rolling through here. If you do have questions, I do want to get to your questions. I know that we've got a lot of people here. Pam Jackson on Facebook, she says, do you think Fox and Diablo will be on the practice squad? Morgan Fox, no. I don't think that Morgan Fox is going to make it to the practice squad. And Divine Diablo is on the active roster. So he's going to be a starter at inside linebacker, so he's not going to be going anywhere. He's had a tremendous camp, and I think he's one of those players who I'm very excited about. Just physically, he fits what Jeff Ulbrich wants to do, and I think that ultimately, I think he's going to add a whole lot to this team. But Morgan Fox is, I mean, a guy with that level of veteran savvy is going to be picked up somewhere. That's why they cut him on Saturday. And generally what you see with veterans who are going to get cut, which is why I'm, again, surprised that a guy like Jordan Fuller was cut, is you see those guys cut earlier in the process so that they have more of a runway for other teams to be like, oh, okay, that veteran got cut. That's somebody who I can add to my team. And I mean, it's just the way it goes in the NFL. It's kind of a, I scratch your back, you scratch mine type of thing. And it's a respect type of thing. It's one of the reasons why I thought CJ Henderson was going to have kind of a better shot of making this roster. That's why, again, why I was a little surprised that Clark Phillips made this roster over CJ Henderson. I thought that Henderson was going to be able to come in there and do that. Xavier Littman on YouTube says the new tackle is not on the 53, so he may start on practice squad. He was a 6th-round pick with little experience. So Dwayne Ledford, the offensive line coach for the Atlanta Falcons, will have a few weeks to get his hands on him while Wilkerson fills in till Norton comes back. So, Xavier, one quick nugget that I almost missed myself when I first read through it. There were only 52 players on the 53-man roster, and that's because he is going to be that 53rd person. You know, so for anybody who wasn't aware, Michael Jarrell, the Falcons send a conditional 7th-round pick to go get him and add him to this team. That trade is not yet official through the league office. So once that trade is made official, he has to pass a physical and do everything else. And then the team is going to tweet about it or send out a press release or something like that. And at that point, it is official. And at that point, he can be added to the 53-man roster. So that's why you only see 52 names on the Falcons roster. So he is going to be coming in here and competing for starting time with Elijah Wilkinson. All right. Nathaniel Sells, he says, on Facebook, he says, when are we ever going to get a legit number 2 quarterback? What cornerback? Well, I would say Mike Hughes is a pretty solid other corner. I mean, he's not spectacular by any means, but he was also somebody who I believe was a former first round pick. You know, so he's got value. And the one thing that's consistent about first round picks in the NFL is that they stick around for a long time. They stick around for a good long while. And it's because they're first round picks for a reason. They have high upside. And Mike Hughes, I think, just needed to find the right situation. And he's been good. He's been good for this Falcons team. That's why they re-sign him and bring him back. But to your point, I do want the Falcons to go and draft a corner. They haven't done it, I think, in 4 or 5 years or something. It's been a long time since this team has invested in the secondary at the cornerback position. AJ Terrell was the last time that they drafted a first-round corner, and that was a good while ago. You know, he's already on his second contract, and he's well into his second contract now at this point. So I think getting a legit set number 2, it depends on what you define as a legit. I think honestly, Hughes is fine. I think he's beyond serviceable. He'll give you everything you need, but in a perfect world, he's your depth guy. So, I mean, maybe you get another guy like that, but I think Mike Hughes is solid. And I as far as legit goes, maybe they go and invest something a little bit pricier to go jump up and get a corner. But what was the pressing need this last cycle? Pass rush. That was the number one thing. And then before that, it was a defensive line. So it's just where it is in the pecking order. I would be very surprised to see this team kind of pass off on that in the draft for much longer. But it's also one of the realities of trading your mid-round picks. You know, I mean, you trade for Matthew Judon last year, you send off a 3rd-round pick. You feel that the next year when you don't have a 3rd-round pick to go invest in a cornerback. So I think that's going to be a move that they make here in the future. But as of this year, I think they're fine at the starting level. AJ Terrell and Mike Hughes as your starting corners, I think are going to be okay. Let's keep on rolling through. Diallo on YouTube says they're going to slide East into the practice squad. I think that's the expectation. I'd be very surprised if they don't sign a practice squad quarterback. Well, they will sign a practice squad quarterback. It's not going to be Kirk Cousins. And I'd be very surprised if it's not Easton Stick. If it's not him, I mean, there are lots of great quarterbacks out there who got cut today or throughout the weekend that they can jump in and potentially go and get. Derek Hart says it was never the plan to trade Kirk. You're right. I've maintained this. It doesn't matter if it's on this podcast or on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game, where you can also hear me do broadcasts there as well. I've been very much in the camp of where the Falcons have been about how this team is not trading Kirk Cousins. I don't think that he's going anywhere. I really do not think he's going anywhere. And I think that this only solidifies that fact. Derek, I want to be careful that what I said earlier was not misconstrued or taken out of context. I don't think that he was going anywhere anyway. Just for anybody out there, any naysayers out there who might say differently, I was just trying to make that point clear. Felipe Franks will be the emergency quarterback, says Michael W. Yeah, I mean, he played quarterback in college. I know the former Florida Gator was bounced around a little bit at college, and he played quarterback. He was brought into the league to play quarterback, and then he got converted by Arthur Smith to play tight end. Yeah, I guess he could theoretically be an emergency quarterback, but I think that's kind of a funny note there. Nathaniel Sells, yep, there it is. I figured somebody was going to be doing that. And look, this is a knock on you. Really wanted Kobe Bryant on the team. I think a lot of people did. You share that sentiment with a whole bunch of people. I think he's really talented. I mean, he's a ball hawk. He's somebody who can get after it and kind of gives you some upside here at the cornerback position. But he was also undrafted for a reason. And I mean, I thought he was going to be a 5th round pick, but there's something else that kind of there's reason for everything. And I don't know what that reason was, why he dropped out necessarily, but he's a UDFA and he doesn't play. He got hurt and he started the season or the training camp period on the NFI list. That makes it very difficult for you to make a 53-man roster if you're not going to be playing as many reps as humanly possible, and we've seen Carlos Washington is another perfect example of that. He's somebody who'd been on this team for a few years now. He got cut. I mean, it's not uncommon for players who are on the bubble to lose it, no matter how talented they are. The best ability is availability. O Diallo says Nick Nash, backup quarterback, LOL. Well, Nick Nash also didn't make the roster, so unfortunately he may not be that guy either, but either way. Sam Klontz II on YouTube, he comes in here and says, Phillips and Alford is surprising. I'd rather keep Henderson than one of them. D. Alford was somebody who I fully expected to be on this roster. Clark Phillips was somebody who I did not expect to be on this roster. But when it's all said and done, I mean, CJ Henderson was only here for a cup of coffee. Like I mentioned with Kobe, the best ability is availability. It took him a good while before he was actually able to sign with his Falcons team. And he worked out, based off of reports, he worked out like 3 weeks ago, and it wasn't until last week that he actually joins the roster and starts like coming in, doing stuff for training camp. It was the day of or day before the Tennessee Titans game, and CJ Henderson just wasn't here long enough, and that's also somebody, he's a former 1st round pick. He was in that same draft class as AJ Terrell. He was a top 10 guy, but then the Jacksonville Jaguars move off of him in like 2 years. And then after that, he just bounces around. He was on the Steelers practice squad. And then he spends the rest of that season on injured reserve. So he's been hampered by injuries. So it's not like, and his talent has been enough to get him around, but I think he struggled to find that next year and to find some consistency for whatever reason. I don't know what it is necessarily, but it is what it is at that point. Maybe he jumps in and maybe they add him to the practice squad. I wouldn't be all that surprised. He's somebody who I think under the tutelage of Raheem Morris, I think he could help. One thing that Raheem Morris does as well as anybody's coach secondary. And that's where he cut his teeth for many years. And I think that ultimately Clark Phillips could be one of those options for that role. We're going to keep on rolling through here. Mike Ford, O Diallo on YouTube says Mike needed to be cut. Ford can't cover nothing. Lamar Jackson was bad. Well, Lamar Jackson had a strong start to camp. O Diallo. He had been sticky in coverage, at least relatively, in camp. And then when he got into the preseason games, he started kind of trend in the wrong direction. He was one of the early cuts there on Saturday, and it was not all that surprising. But he had almost played his way up to the roster. So, I mean, ultimately, when it's all said and done, I mean, this secondary is going to need some help. And I mean, I think maybe the presence of Jeff Ulbrich and the updated scheme and ultimately a new pass rush that I think is going to be a lot better. That's going to be the biggest thing. More important than I would say just about anything is the fact that this pass rush is going to jump into the 40s or hopefully, fingers crossed, into the 50s when it comes to sacks. And I think that they have the talent to do that. And the reality is when you have that many sacks, everybody else benefits. And I want to say, I can't remember who said it. It's a Buccaneers coach, and it was some documentary that I was watching the other day. And it was, and it's if a quarterback gets sacked, they have something like a 7% chance of scoring a touchdown on that drive. That's how important it is to sack the quarterback. And more important than anything, the Falcons invested heavily into a pass rush that I think is going to take a big old step forward. I mean, in a past podcast, I talked about how James Pierce Jr. was going to come in and be a very realistic option when it comes down to the Defensive Rookie of the Year vote. If he can get up to that 7.5-ish, 8 tackle or sacks, I think you're very much looking at a guy who can go off and win a Defensive Rookie of the Year. So very excited about that. All right, Pam Jackson comes in here. No worries. She says, I may have missed this. Who do you think will take McGary's position to block Penix? I'm going to keep coming back to this because this is the biggest news of the day. For anybody who wasn't aware, Kaleb McGary is on the injured reserve. And because he is put on the injured reserve to start the season before the 53-man roster officially came out, he's going to miss the season. So that's just a damn shame for the Atlanta Falcons and a damn shame for him. They just signed him to a big old contract extension, and they were looking forward to that continuity on the offensive line to really be a strength again in 2025, but it's not. Storm Norton is the primary guy who would come in and be the swing tackle, meaning he's going to be either left tackle or right tackle, Pam. But Storm Norton had an ankle injury, and he had a surgery done. He's going to be out till about the bye week, week 5. So in the meantime, Elijah Wilkinson is going to be your primary starting right tackle right now. But the Falcons go and trade a conditional 7th-round pick in 2027 for Michael Jarrell out there in Seattle. So he's going to come in here. He's kind of a below average option, I would say, at right tackle. But he's got a couple of games that he has under his belt. And I think, it's competition. And Brandon Parker wasn't going to be a very good option for the Falcons there. Neither was Jack Nelson. So ultimately you needed to have another body here, another guy with some starting caliber experience and just to be a body at the end of the day. But Pam, to answer your question, ultimately, I think that, maybe they're active on the waiver wire and they could jump in and do something in that way. But we'll continue with that. So Diallo says, I'm not sold on Sills. I don't know why you wouldn't be sold on him necessarily, Diallo, but he's had a fantastic camp. He's a bigger body. People talk about how he is on this roster, there's not a lot of height. And I'm talking specifically at the wide receiver position. Drake London, of course, is massive. The only other big, tall guy who a lot of people see basically as a one-for-one clone of Drake London, obviously to a lesser degree, is Kenny Stills. Or David Stills, excuse me. And what he's going to be able to do is give you actual wide receiver reps. Casey Washington's been valuable in that role, stepping in for an injured Darnell Mooney, who's missed the entirety of camp. But then Jamal Agnew and Kadero Hodge are special teams guys. They're not going to really give you a whole lot when it comes to actually running routes and being a wide receiver on offense. So you needed another guy who was going to come in and be that for you. Maybe you go get somebody in on the waivers. There is potential that you could do that, but the staff seems very high on Sills. And he's played well through camp. He was a favorite target for Kirk Cousins throughout training camp. And he played well in preseason games whenever he had the opportunity to get in there. So you're not sold on him. He was a roster bubble player for a reason. He's not going to come in here and give you 500-600 yards or anything like that, but he might be able to come in and be a stopgap here in the wake of Ray McLeod still dealing with a couple of injuries and Darnell Mooney, his status being clear. But the important thing for Ray and Darnell, though, neither of them land with any injury designation of any kind. So I know that they've been very vague. Raheem Morris has been very vague with the status of of Darnell Mooney. This tells me that hopefully he will be ready early in the season, hopefully even for week 1. We're going to keep on going through. Sam Klont said, I went to Georgia Southern too. Hail Southern, man. No place else. Make You Fumble on YouTube says Jordan Fuller got cut. Yes, Jordan Fuller did get cut. It was one of the more surprising decisions that came out today. I wasn't 100% sure that he was going to be a starter for this team. I know Xavier Watts has had a fantastic camp, and he's looked very good, and he's kind of slowly moved into that starting role. And he's been taking a lot of reps with the ones. And DeMarco Hellams has been playing a lot alongside of Jordan Fuller. And I think Hellams is young. He's going to give you a little bit of upside, and he brings the boom. Everyone remembers what he did against the Lions in that first preseason game. The dude likes to lay the rubber, man, and you need a thumper like that on the backside. And Jordan Fuller, I think his big plus was that he was experienced, and he played with Raheem Morris before. And, I thought that was going to be enough, at least at the beginning of camp. But slowly but surely, Xavier Watts just kept pushing along. And I think this is ultimately a good sign from the coaching staff that says, hey, we've got a dude, and Xavier Watts is going to come in and be a contributor, a young guy contributing in a big way early on in the season. We're going to keep on rolling through. If you still have questions, I'm going to continue taking your questions here for a little bit longer, and we'll keep rolling through. Bucks, Rays, and Bolts. I think you're a Tampa guy, but Bucks in trouble with some injuries too. Yeah, they definitely are. I know we've talked to Godwin's on the shelf. Werps is on the shelf. They've got several guys. I haven't actually had the time to kind of go through their roster just because it takes a while to go through ours. And I know that they're going to have several guys who are going to be on the IR or be on IR designated to return, PUP list, et cetera, et cetera. And that's your week 1 opponent. So if they're banged up and you're banged up, it's kind of a toss-up anyway because it's a divisional game. But I mean, the onus is on the Falcons. The Falcons have to go out and have a great game plan and have a good performance, especially with the way that you don't play guys in the preseason, and when that's happening, you don't play guys. You need to come out fast. You need to start fast. And I think for Raheem Morris's sake, Zach Robinson had a terrible game plan last year against the Steelers. And I mean, that had as much to do with TJ Watt just blowing up Kaleb McGary, and then Zach Robinson not really adjusting super well to his first ever game as a play caller. I don't expect that kind of performance, where you only score 10 points and you lose to a team who only kicks a bunch of field goals. But this is still a really good Bucs team. This is a team who's won 4 consecutive NFC South titles. It doesn't matter how down a division is. You win 4 in a row, and that's not nothing. And you have veteran experience on that team. You've got a Baker Mayfield who's got some swagger, and he knows they got a chip on their shoulder. They want to come to Atlanta and beat the Falcons. That's really what they want to do, and the Falcons have to avoid that, especially in this early part of the schedule. That is so difficult. I've got my predictions, my 17-game prediction that's going to be coming out tomorrow. Make sure to keep an eye out for that. Give me a follow at GChapATL, and then you can see that. Turn on those notifications, and you'll hear that and see that whenever it does come out. I'm going to take a very quick water break. We have a ton of questions, lots of great questions. If you want to get yours in, make sure to drop those in here. It doesn't matter what platform you're on, whether it's Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook. I'm going to be taking your questions right over here in the comments. They're just continuing to flow in. I'm going to take a quick water break, but while you're at it, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and share with your friends just so you can get more of this Falcons coverage. Give me 2 seconds. All right. Appreciate you. All right. So Make You Fumble says, so we only have 3 safeties. Yes, we only have 3 safeties. You're not going to rotate a whole bunch just in general at that position. It's just the reality of it. I mean, Jesse Bates is going to be your starter there. You may even go into single high safety or things like that. You put out a couple more cornerbacks out on the field. Just based off the types of coverages that they're going to want to use. I was surprised that they're going to roll with 3. I thought that they were going to hold on to 4. The cut with Jordan Fuller was altogether surprising. It was the second big surprise that I had listed. But Odialo does mention, that defense is going to play them rookies. Yeah, a lot of rookies are going to be playing on this Falcons defense. It's going to be young. We've talked about Xavier Watts. We've talked a little bit about Billy Bowman, even a little bit about James Pierce. But Jalen Walker is somebody who, the Falcons take him 15 overall. They're expecting him to have a big role on this team very early. And he's going to be primarily used as an edge rusher. That's not going to be something that's going to change all that much through the early parts of the season. And that's just kind of the role he's going to have. And eventually, I think they see him moving into a Caden Ellis role. But as far as the early development is concerned, James Pierce, Xavier Watts, and Billy Bowman, I think, are a little bit further along. Jalen Walker has been dealing with a lot of injuries, but he's also nowhere near the final level of potential that he's going to reach here in a Falcons uniform. I'm very excited about what the former Georgia Bulldog can do here. But it should be pretty good. Just in terms of what your rookies are going to do, they've been very impressive. Very impressive. Your 4 defensive rookies. Jack Nelson is your last rookie. He made the roster. And that's probably the nicest thing that I can say about it. He got better as the summer went on. Let's just say that. They got better. And ultimately, he may be one of the first casualties if and when they go and make additions to this offensive line that does need a little bit of help as well. Alexander Talome, he says, is it safe to say Billy Bowman is the starting slot corner? In my opinion, I think he will be the starting slot corner. He may not be the first guy who trots out on the field. It may still be a D. Alford, might be Mike Ford. I think it's going to be Billy Bowman. That's my expectation. That's going to be one of those things that I'm going to keep an eye out for just in general when this team comes out on September 7th. But I think he's the starting cornerback. He may not. He's going to get a lot of run. That's ultimately what's more important than anything. August 809 on YouTube says, don't like that they kept CJ Henderson and kept Felipe Franks. I think there's something to be said about the way a guy practices, August. It's one of those things that you watch Felipe Franks practice and you can see why a coaching staff is big on him. You see why a coaching staff gets excited about a guy like that. And it's not always about necessarily what they do on Sundays either. He's somebody who's going to give you something every single day he suits up. Guys like that make rosters. Guys like that are valuable in special teams. Guys like that, the dudes who can come in and just be football players. I think Felipe Franks embodies that as well as anybody on this roster. And it's why I initially had him on my 53-man, and then Teagan goes and plays a little better in special teams, and that's why I kind of flip-flop back that way, and then Teagan was my final decision there. But I think at least I made a note of this. I don't know if I included it in the final article, but I basically throw out the fact that a guy like Felipe Franks is not surprising that he makes the roster. I would not be surprised at all. And I'm surprised they kept 4. I'm not surprised that Felipe Franks is on this roster, though. I'm going to keep on going through. Odialo says, I'm not sold on Billy Bowman. I don't know. I don't know what you haven't seen from him. In practices, he's been fantastic. He's got the perfect body type for it. He's a rookie. So rookies are going to make mistakes. So he's not going to come in here and be perfect from day one. But I think he's going to come in and be a very effective player. I know that physically he fits what they want to do at the position. Tony T203 on YouTube says, Falcons don't want to admit they wasted another draft pick. There's no way JD Bertrand warranted a roster spot. That guy is straight garbage. I don't think he's straight garbage. I did put out a piece yesterday that said that I didn't really expect him to make this final roster. I don't think he's a great scheme fit for Jeff Ulbricht's defense that he's bringing in. I think he's more of a passive linebacker who wants to kind of play in kind of what Jimmy Lake was bringing out last year. But this is also one of the realities of having several defensive coordinators. I want to say it's 4 defensive coordinators in the last 4 years. It's not great. And Nielsen came and gone. I'm blanking on his name. I shouldn't have done that. But look, I think that you've had a lot of defensive coordinators. You've had a lot of new people who are calling plays there. And that means you have a lot of different schemes. And that means you have a lot of different bodies who are brought in to fit those schemes. And so you've drafted for 4 different schemes in 4 years, and you're going to have an island of misfit toys on your backside. And I think Terry Fontenot's done a decent enough job of filling talent out on this team. JD Bertrand I don't think he's a safe roster spot. I was a little bit surprised that they opted to keep him. I thought that D'Angelo Malone was going to be listed as an outside linebacker, and they were going to keep a Khalid Kareem or something like that, potentially at the edge or at outside linebacker, and JD Bertrand was going to be moved off of. But I will also say this, Tony, this is just my opinion. I think that the front office is way too slow in admitting that they made mistakes. I think that a lot of football teams are like that, though. I mean, Thomas Dimitroff was like that with Vic Beasley. They go in and they pick up his 5th-year option. I thought that was a mistake. You pick up the 5th-year option on Kyle Pitts. I think that was a mistake. A lot of guys who, when they draft a player, specifically in the first round, maybe not quite as much with these later rounds, like with JD Bertrand's case, but when you sign these guys or you draft these guys, there's a reason you draft them. And sometimes Terry Fontenot is victim to this. You kind of fall in love with a certain player, and you got to be able to move on quickly. And I think the best teams in the NFL are consistently effective at moving on at the appropriate time. The Falcons have not always been that team. But that's also a franchise who's missed the playoffs 7 consecutive years. That's one of those reasons, and I don't think that JD Bertrand's necessarily the perfect example of that. I think that's more just a reality of the talent that you have at the position. And also the fact that you're not really going to play him all that much. He ran with the 2s a good bit, but it's going to be Divine Diablo and Caden Ellis. There's not going to be a lot of turnover at that spot. I know we talked about the defensive line specifically. That's going to have a lot of run, a lot of a rotation there. The inside linebacker is not going to be a position that I see a lot of turnover there. And even then, Josh Woods might be the next guy off the bench anyway. So JD might just be a depth player. He might come in and, continue to develop. He's still a rookie, first-year pro. He's 1 year in the league. He still had some time. Derek Hart says, y'all hit that like button. Yeah, appreciate you, Derek. Thanks, buddy. I'm going to keep on rolling through. August 809, D. Alford does punt return. Yes, that's one of the valuable things that players have to do. They have to find ways to add value to the team. JD Bertrand adds value in that way in special teams. Josh Woods on special teams. Felipe Franks in special teams. D. Alford in special teams. He can return punts. He can return kicks. He's probably going to be the guy backing up Jamal Agnew in that role. So there's another reason why he's on this roster. Let's keep on rolling through. I probably have time for a handful of other questions here. Oh, there we go. Bud Burris comes in and drops, or Gata Bud comes in with $10. I appreciate that. Thank you for any donations that people throw. I really do appreciate that. Appreciate it. But he says, thanks for talking me off the ledge for the past few months, and congratulations on the new gig. Go buy some beer. I appreciate you, Bud. He's a good friend of mine. He's a good man. He's a big Younghoe Koo fan. He's a Georgia Southern grad, and he loves Younghoe Koo as much as he loves the Falcons, I think. So I know he's really excited about that one. Keep on rolling through. Yeah, and I see a lot of people are going through and talking about this situation where the secondary, JD Bertrand making the roster and Ford making the roster. Yeah, it's because of special teams. It's what they add in that role. Jacob Marthison, great question. Lenny Krieg, the kicker, the other kicker. We just talked to Gatabud, and he mentioned that he's excited about Younghoe Koo. Lenny Krieg is going to be destined for the practice squad, likely, unless some other team picks him up. I think Dustin Hopkins or something. I think he was cut by the Browns, but I think they also had somebody else on that roster who they were going to bring in. A lot of these guys at the kicker position, Younghoe Koo talks about it, or talked about it earlier in the camp. You have 32 kickers, and oftentimes there are just 32 kickers on the roster. Just because there's not somebody who was brought into camp to compete with you does not mean that you have competition. Every single kicker who is around the NFL is competing for those jobs. And Lenny Krieg he's going to make the practice squad, to answer your question. But there's always competition, and I know that other teams are going to be looking at him. Maybe they saw enough from him. Maybe they didn't. I think he's going to slip through, and I think he's going to end up on the Falcons practice squad. And because of the International Pathways program, he'll be afforded a 17th roster spot. on that practice squad so the Falcons can carry the extra player. Dean Pease, yes. Sam Klontz II. Yes, Dean Pease. Dean Pease was his name. I blanked on his name, and I completely forgot. Appreciate you following in here. Keep on rolling through. Probably have time for 2 or 3 more questions. KB Free says Woods and JD are in different worlds. I agree. I think Woods is the third guy on the roster. I think JD was just younger. That's all. I think Josh Woods is going to be your third guy, but ultimately Bertrand may or may not end up on this team by week 1. Still have some time between now and then. He says, he follows it up and says JD will be gone. He says, hopefully JD will be gone when Anderson comes back. Here's hoping. Yeah, and that's one other piece of news. I don't know if I got into it or not, but Troy Anderson, he is on the reserve PUP list, which means he's going to miss the first 4 games of the season. I would imagine that he would be the 4th linebacker when he comes back. As soon as he does come back from that knee injury, at that point, he'll be damn near 12 months removed from when he initially hurt it against the Saints last year. Troy Anderson was drafted with a second round pick, and he was expected to come in and be a stalwart at that position, and he hasn't been. But if he can come back and be healthy and at least take some reps, I do fully expect him to come in and replace JD Bertrand there. All right. Well, folks, I really appreciate all the wonderful people who got in here. We've had well over 300 people at any given time watching this podcast and this live stream here across all of our platforms between Facebook. I know on YouTube, we've got 100 plus people, and on Twitter, we've got almost 200 people in there as well. So huge thank you to everybody who jumped in here tonight. I know we've had a ton of awesome news, and I appreciate all of your comments and questions and everything else. Remember, Scott and Nick are going live at 8:30 on Wednesday. They'll be back again on Monday after that, every single Monday and Wednesday. And then every single Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock, you'll get me. So if there's any content that you want on this channel, drop a comment and let me know. Hit me up at GChapATL. That's the best way to get in touch with me. But we will be back on Thursday because we got real football coming up. We can start shifting our focus to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm so excited for that. Plus, we'll have more reactions too because we'll have the practice squad that'll be solidified. That comes out at noon tomorrow. We'll have that reaction for you as well. But I fully expect this roster to update just a little bit. But make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe and stay up to date. And if you're on Twitter, hit those notifications and you'll get all the content from me there as well. Give me a follow at GChapATL while you're at it. But head on over to si.com/NFL/Falcons to get your Falcons fix there too. My name is Garrett Chapman for Falcons on SI. I'll see you all very soon. Till then, go Falcons.